local diver named Kihachiro Aratake saw something that should not exist. He was searching for hammerhead sharks. He found a mountain with perfect 90-degree angles. You are 25 meters beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan. The pressure here is 3 times that of the air you're breathing now. The current is strong enough to rip a regulator from your mouth. Through the deep blue haze, Aratake saw what appeared to be a vast stone staircase rising from the seabed. A single, solid monolith, 150 meters long. Think of 2 football fields, stood on their end, and sunk. His report was met with skepticism, then ridicule. The official explanation came swiftly. It is a natural geological formation, just a rock. And here is where the story should have ended. But it didn't, because geologists had to explain away the steps, and the twin pillars that stand side by side, and a triangular pool carved with a precision that defies nature. The textbook answer is that the rock is sandstone, which naturally fractures along straight planes when subjected to tectonic stress. But textbooks don't always tell the whole story. They often omit the uncomfortable details. Look closer, you can see what appear to be tool marks. Scratches and gouges that do not match the clean breaks of natural erosion. Enter Professor Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist at the University of the Ryukyus. For over 20 years, he has dived here more than 100 times, meticulously mapping the entire structure. His conclusion is direct, and it contradicts every mainstream historian on the planet. He calls it a monument, built by a super-ancient civilization. Yes, you heard that correctly. A civilization. Kimura estimates the structure was built on dry land around 10,000 BC, before being submerged by rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age. That would make it more than twice as old as the Great Pyramid of Giza. It would predate Stonehenge by 7,000 years. This changes everything you learned in school. It suggests a lost chapter of human history, drowned beneath the waves. So, who do you believe? The geologists who studied it from a distance? Or the one who spent 2 decades mapping every single stone? Kimura's most controversial claim wasn't the giant turtle carving or the stadium-like arena. It was something much smaller. His team found markings deep within a crevice, protected from the relentless currents. Symbols arranged in a line. The official reports call them scratches. But if you look at the evidence, they look an awful lot like writing. If this is just a rock, who wrote on it? The question of writing is where the official story begins to fracture. To mainstream science, these marks are pareidolia, a trick of the mind seeing patterns where none exist. They are simply scratches carved by millennia of ocean currents dragging smaller rocks across the surface. A perfectly reasonable explanation, except for one detail. Professor Kimura's team took silicone molds of the markings. They found the grooves were not V-shaped like a natural scratch. They were U-shaped, consistent with being carved by a primitive tool. Think about that. Nature doesn't use tools. The official reports mention the scratches, but they rarely mention their shape. Why? To accept these as tool marks is to accept that someone was here, someone with purpose. And that opens a door to a time that history has forgotten. Let's travel back 12,000 years, to 10,000 BC. Forget the deep blue water and the crushing pressure. You are standing on dry land. The air is colder, cleaner. The sea level is 40 meters lower than it is today. Where you stand is not a small island. It is the southern tip of a massive peninsula connected to modern-day Taiwan. A land bridge. This was the world at the end of the last great ice age, a world of giant deer and nomadic hunters. These were the ancestors of the Jomon people, Japan's first culture, known for creating the oldest pottery on Earth. They were sophisticated. They were organized. But could they build a mountain? Here's where it gets interesting. The ice was melting fast. Between 12,000 and 7,000 years ago, the planet went through a period of catastrophic sea level rise. Glaciers the size of continents collapsed into the ocean. There were periods called meltwater pulses, where global sea levels could rise several meters in a single century. Imagine watching the coastline move inland, not over a lifetime, but over a single year. Your hunting grounds vanish. Your villages are swallowed. A motion apocalypse. Kimura's theory rests on this exact event. He argues the Yonaguni Monument was built on this peninsula, just before the water came, a final desperate construction from a civilization on the brink of being erased. Now, let's be fair. The counter-argument is powerful, and it has a name: Dr. Robert Schoch. A geologist from Boston University, Schoch dived the site in 1997. He saw the same steps, the same angles. But he came to a very different conclusion. He argues that this is all natural. Yonaguni is made of sandstone from the Yayama group, and which is famous for its well-defined parallel bedding planes. He believes tectonic activity fractured the rock along these straight lines, and the strong currents did the rest, washing away the debris and leaving behind what looks like architecture. It's a compelling case. Sandstone does break like this. Tectonic forces are immensely powerful. But the theory of nature struggles to explain away everything. It struggles with the loop road, a 5-meter wide path that encircles the monument. It struggles with the turtle, a separate rock formation carved into a distinct shape. And it completely fails to explain the Gosentai, 2 enormous, semi-detached pillars that look uncannily like a gateway. Nature is random. It operates on chaos. But this place feels deliberate. It feels planned. So you have 2 choices. Either this is one of the most incredible coincidences in geological history, or you are looking at the work of human hands. The debate has raged for decades. Geologists versus archaeologists. Natural formation versus lost city. But what if both sides are missing the point? What if they are asking the wrong question? The evidence doesn't point to a city where people lived. There are no signs of homes, no pottery shards, no hearths. It's a monument, a temple perhaps, a place of ceremony, which forces us to ask a much deeper question. If this wasn't built for living, who was it built for? Who was it built for? The question hangs in the water, thick as the silt. Perhaps it was for their gods, or for something in the sky. Masaki Kimura has documented dozens of features that defy simple explanation, but one stands apart. He calls it the human head, a massive carving, nearly 7 meters tall, with what appear to be distinct eyes and a mouth. Mainstream geologists call it a rock. Another coincidence, another trick of the light. You have to ask yourself, how many coincidences can one rock have before it stops being a coincidence? The official reports focus on the large, straight lines. They are easier to explain away. They rarely mention the smaller details, the strange animal carvings, the star-like patterns. This is the part nobody likes to talk about, because these details don't fit the neat, tidy explanation of natural erosion. They are inconvenient truths. And for decades, the biggest argument against Yonaguni being man-made was simple. People in 10,000 BC were believed to be primitive hunter-gatherers. They couldn't possibly organize a workforce to quarry, move, and shape hundreds of multi-ton stone blocks. It was considered impossible, until it wasn't. Now, let's leave Japan for a moment. Travel 9,000 kilometers west to the arid plains of southeastern Turkey. In 1994, a discovery was made that forced historians to tear up their textbooks. A site called Göbekli Tepe. It is a vast complex of massive T-shaped stone pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in perfect circles. They are covered in intricate carvings of predators and strange symbols. It is a temple. And here is the part that changes everything. Carbon dating places its construction at 9,500 BC. Yes, you heard that right. A full 6,000 years before Stonehenge. It was built by people who hadn't even invented pottery yet, let alone metal tools. Göbekli Tepe proved that pre-agricultural societies were capable of incredible feats of engineering, architecture, and symbolic thought. The old story was wrong, utterly wrong. And this is where the official narrative on Yonaguni begins to look less like science and more like stubbornness. The primary objection to Yonaguni's artificiality has been completely invalidated by a site halfway across the world. So why hasn't the case been reopened? Why is Kimura's work still dismissed as pseudoscience? Because accepting Yonaguni means accepting that we have a hole in our history. A 7,000-year gap between the end of the Ice Age and the rise of the first known civilizations in Mesopotamia. What happened in those 7 millennia? Göbekli Tepe gives us one clue. Yonaguni might give us another. Think about what that means. It means sophisticated cultures could have risen, flourished, and vanished long before the first word of history was ever written. Drowned by the rising seas. Forgotten. And here's where the story takes a darker turn. The debate has always been framed as a simple binary. Nature versus man. But what if they're both right and both wrong? Remember, Yonaguni sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, specifically on the Ryukyu Trench Subduction Zone, one of the most seismically active places on Earth. An earthquake in this very spot in 1771 created a tsunami with an estimated maximum wave height of 85 meters. That's a 28-story made of water moving at the speed of a jet. The sheer power is unimaginable. What if the monument wasn't just a temple? What if it was a calendar? An observatory built to track the very tectonic forces that would eventually destroy it? The ultimate irony is this. Dr. Robert Schoch, the main skeptic, bases his entire theory on the region's unique tectonic stress fracturing the rock. Masaki Kimura, the main proponent, believes a culture built a monument here because of its unique spiritual power, a power likely tied to the violent, earth-shaking forces of this place. Both of their arguments depend on the same terrifying fact. This place is dangerously, violently alive. The people who may have built this weren't just erased by the water. They were likely swallowed by the earth itself. And the structure they left behind is not a tomb for a king or a temple to a sun god. It is a monument to their own destruction. Those words are cold, clinical. But the people who may have built this were not an abstract concept. They were flesh and blood. They had children. They watched the sun rise over an ocean they trusted. What did they feel in those final moments as the earth groaned beneath their feet? You don't have to imagine. You just have to listen. For generations, the elders on Yonaguni have told stories of Nirai Kanai, a mythical place across the sea, the source of all life and the destination for souls after death. But some versions of the legend are different. They speak of a physical city, a great palace that sank beneath the waves in a terrible cataclysm. Folklorists dismiss these as simple creation myths until Kihachiro Arataki found a mountain with stairs. Think about that. Just the story was here the entire time, hiding in plain sight, dismissed as a children's tale. The Okinawan languages even have specific terms for underwater ruins, like gusuku. Why would a language have a word for something that supposedly doesn't exist? Textbooks on Japanese history almost never mention this. It's a footnote, if it's there at all. And here's where the story becomes a warning. On April 24, 1771, a massive earthquake struck the Ryukyu Trench. The official record states it was an 8.5 on the Richter scale. The resulting tsunami was called the Great Tsunami of Meiwa. It didn't just flood the coastline, it scoured it clean. Eyewitness accounts, passed down through families, speak of a black wall of water that blotted out the sun. It moved with unnatural speed. It made no sound until it hit. The wave that struck the nearby Ishigaki Island was estimated to be 85 meters high. Let that number sink in. That is a 28-story of solid water moving at 700 kilometers per hour. Entire villages vanished. More than 12,000 people were erased from existence in a matter of minutes. Their bodies, their homes, their history, gone. The wave picked up a 750-ton block of coral and deposited it over 2.5 kilometers inland. A single block, 750 tons. That's the weight of 2 Boeing 747 jets. The people of Yonaguni have lived with this memory for centuries. It's in their blood. It is a deep respect for the ocean mixed with a healthy dose of fear. They know what the sea can do, and they know it will happen again. So when you look at the monument, you see it differently. You're not just looking at stone. You're looking at the last will and testament of a people who faced this exact power. The straight lines are not just geometry. They are a desperate attempt to impose order on a chaotic, violent world. The carvings are not just art. They are a message that says, we were here, this happened to us, do not forget. And we did forget for 12,000 years. The structure beneath the waves isn't just a relic of a lost world, it's a forecast for ours. Because the tectonic plates are still grinding, the pressure is still. The only thing that has changed is that now millions more people live on these same coastlines, completely unaware of the clock ticking beneath their feet. Is ticking, right now. The pressure builds year after year, millimeter by millimeter. We treat our coastlines as permanent property, a place for holidays and high-rises. But the people who may have lived here 12,000 years ago knew better. They knew the land was only ever borrowed from the sea. And this is why the endless debate over the monument misses the point. Man-made? Natural? It doesn't matter. The question itself has become a distraction. For over 3 decades, scientists have argued about the hand that held the chisel. They have ignored the story written in the stone itself, a story of deep time, a story of unimaginable power. Think about Masaki Kimura. He is now in his 80s. He has dedicated a third of his life to this single, silent structure. He has published hundreds of pages, created detailed 3D models, and faced decades of international ridicule from his peers. Why? What drives a man to do that? You have to ask what he's really fighting for. It isn't about proving he's right. It's about ensuring a memory survives. The official reports, the ones in the textbooks, they'll tell you it's sandstone. Yaeyama Group sandstone, to be precise. They will not tell you about the legends of Nirai Kanai, the sunken city. That part is always left out. And here's the part that nobody says out loud. The real value of Yonaguni isn't its age or its size. Its value is its ambiguity. It sits perfectly on the line between what we know for certain and what we can only dare to imagine. It forces you to look at the world differently. It forces you to accept that history is not a straight line, marching forward. It's a cycle, a rhythm of creation and destruction played out over millennia. The structure is an echo, a geological memory. It remembers a time when the sea was 40 meters lower. It remembers the ice. It remembers the people who stood upon it, looking out at a world on the verge of disappearing forever. We have spent so much time analyzing the shape of the echo. We have completely missed the sound. Perhaps the purpose of this monument was never to be fully understood by its own time. Perhaps it was designed to be found thousands of years later by a civilization just like ours. A civilization that has also built its greatest cities on the edge of the water. A civilization that has also forgotten